Welcome to Miniatures Photography 101 with Mark Gunter Photography. So we're going to pick up where we left off with the last episode. We're now going to look at the images we captured of our miniatures, and we're going to walk through how to prepare those to share. My preference is to work with Lightroom and Photoshop. It's what I've been using for years. I'm very comfortable with it. Whatever software you are using, everything applies. It's just a matter of finding out where the tool is that you need at a given time. Here we have our 6 images. We've got an image of each with a white ball card and without the white ball card. And we did that very intentionally so that we can make sure our color balance is right in the image. So let's go ahead and jump right in. Okay, so now we're in the develop module of Lightroom. The right-hand side is where all the work happens. Here at the very top, we've got our histogram. This is going to mimic what was in the camera. You've got your curves with your blacks, shadows, your midtones, your highlights, and your whites. And in this case, it's also giving us red, green, and blue RGB curves as well behind here. Most of what we'll do today is right here towards the top. There's a ton of tools in here. You could have a field day playing with it, but we're trying to keep this simple. So our first step is to correct our white balance. Here in the basic part of the develop module, we have a handy tool called a white balance selector. We happen to have a white balanced card in our shot. And as noted in the previous things, you could do anything from a piece of white paper, you can use dead grass, faded denim, anything that's a neutral in color is going to work here. You just need something that helps you get any color balance issues out of the way. If I zoom in here at 100%, so you can see what the full size of the image is. This looks pretty close to the actual color. Over in the white balance section, we have got our color temperature shows 6400 Kelvin. As we come over to the white balance card, you'll notice on the target, it's giving us a sense of what the pixels look like. If I'm over here on the paratrooper, you'll see that it changes to show you each individual pixel in the image. We could actually use almost anything on the screen to white balance if we find a place where the percentages of all 3 numbers are pretty close. It can do some color shift though, which is why we want to do it off of something that is color neutral. So we come over here and we look for something that's generally close. Here we're only 1.5% off between green and blue. We'll just go ahead and pick that. Gets my color temperature to shift from 6400 Kelvin to 6800 Kelvin. This looks like the miniature I painted. So mission accomplished. Now that we know what our white balance should be, 6800 Kelvin, we can go over to the other image and make that adjustment there. Now, the first thing to notice is when we come over here, our temperature is at 6200. We need that to be 6800. The white ball card tells us that it should be 6800. Now, we could just click on this and change that number, typing it in. We could use the slider, or in Lightroom, we can come to the previous button, and it's going to take the changes we just made on the other picture and make the adjustment here for us. It doesn't look bad. He's a little washed out. The colors are right though, so we don't want to tamper with the colors. I don't really care for this little strip here. I can take my healing brush and I can get rid of that real quick. And again, whatever software you're using is going to have something similar to this. That looks pretty good. So now we want to improve the overall look of the image without actually changing the color on the model, unless the colors aren't right. In this case, I feel like they're pretty good. So in general, when you're working with photo editing software, you want to start at the top of your list and just work your way down. We've done the white balance. Now let's do the exposure. That's not bad. Notice what's happening with the histogram. As I slide left, everything falls into the dark. So we could do that. But remember, we went through quite a bit of trouble to get our exposure right. And even though the histogram suggests it's not quite right, because it's washed out, there's another way to do this. I would prefer to go in on the shadows and pull those shadows down and watch the histogram. I'm all the way over. We've moved some into the shadows. but we're nowhere near the edge yet. Our whites are still good. Let's move the blacks over a little bit. That doesn't look bad. So what we're doing, exposure will adjust the entire image. When you go into this highlight, shadows, whites, and blacks, it's actually talking about the histogram here, and it's adjusting those portions of the image instead of doing the whole picture. So we haven't done anything to our whites, and we don't need to because our whites are good. We haven't done anything with highlights. Now we do have right along here on his shoulder some highlights caused mostly by the sealer. Since this is a game piece, we've used a sealer on it. We could slide the highlight over and dampen that down just a little bit. Now, keep an eye on that histogram. We've pulled the whites back a little bit to get rid of that. We could bring the whites up. Now let's compare what we've done to the actual model. The colors haven't really changed. What we've done is gotten rid of the haze. And you could use a dehaze slider. You can even use the clarity slider to some extent. But a lot of times those will be a little too overpowering. This picture is a little dark for my taste. If we pull the blacks up a little bit, I kind of like that. It would be nice to have the background darker. So let's come up to our masking tool. And we're going to choose subject. And the AI in Lightroom is going to pick our model, and usually does a pretty good job of it. We can take our mask and we're going to invert it. So now it's picked everything else. You see there's some spots of our model that are getting caught up here. So we can subtract with a brush, and we can kind of come in here. We're going to call that pretty good. Now we're going to, now that we have it masked out a little better, I'm going to take these blacks and I'm going to pull those down. See how far down it'll go? We don't need it that far down. Right about there is good. Let's take our shadows down. Problem is that you can see some of the masking. Now we can do some cleanup here. Now that we see what it's doing, we can go to add. You need to choose the brush again to make sure it knows what tool you're using. And now we can do a little extra cleanup here. You can literally spend hours poring over this sort of thing. My suggestion is to not to. Overall, that doesn't look terrible. Now we can hide the mask. And you see the difference there that it made. Okay, so it's a rough mask. We're okay with that. It looks all right. Let's zoom out. Now we're using this for social media, so we're going to want to crop it probably to a 1:1 ratio. Crop as you must for whatever you're using. We're going to drop in, and rule of thirds can come into play here. I usually like to get the top line right underneath the chin, the bottom line right around the top of the base on a miniature of this scale. That gives the model room to breathe within the frame. This is pretty good. So let's go ahead. I'm going to export this. That's our first model. Now let's go to our next picture, which is an amazing shot of the white ball card in front of a rifleman. First thing we're going to do is go after our white balance. Now I would note, we do actually have a little bit of glare on the black and the white, and this is catching a lot of light. That's hard to tell in camera. I think we're probably pretty good. If we come in here, you'll notice that the percentages are very close. 96% on red and green and 96.1 on blue. If we slide around, here's one they're all perfectly even, 96.1 across the board. Let's go ahead and click that point. We're going from 6800 Kelvin to click. It's at 6900 Kelvin. Didn't really change the color that much. I'm familiar with the plinth. The plinth looks that color in real life. We're going to go with it. So we go over to the picture we're going to keep, and we're going to hit previous. We've gone from 6450 to 6900. Notice again, the Kelvin was different because we had the gray card in the first picture. This model looks accurate to me. So let's start out with a quick cropping. I do like to crop first to get the image situated the way I want it to, and we're going to straighten this one out a little bit. We don't want the plinth. We do want the rifleman. And the question is, do we want the built to spec part? I think we can probably crop that out and just go with the information on the blueprint because we want a better image of the mech. This is an image of the mech, not of the plinth. There's our cropped image. I could go with this as it is. One thing I think I would change is the background is not quite as dark as I would like. So where we could do the masking as we did last time, and it'd actually be easier on this one, I want to use this image to show you how to work with the histogram a little better. So in most programs, you'll have these little shadow clipping and highlight clipping items in the upper right corner. If we click this on, if we come down here to our blacks and we start to slide that to the left, we'll watch what happens to the histogram. Everything on the histogram is moving to the left. And there we start to get a little warning light. And now you see on the image itself, we get this blue creeping on. What this is telling us is that our blacks aren't going to get any blacker. They are as dark as they can get. So you're not gaining anything. Now, if you want complete and total blackness in the background, that's great. But we usually want to sort of ride that line a little closer. So I'm going to pull this back and we're going to go back to where that turns to yellow, then it turns to, it usually will turn to red too, but this looks good. When that arrow goes off, that means that you have nothing actually falling off the frame. Now notice how dark the background got. It's a subtle change, but it went from a really, really, really dark gray to almost a pure black. That's good. That's what I want to help bring this model out. Now, on the other hand, turn that one off, turn the other one on, and I'm pretty pleased with this one. If anything, I want it a little lighter on the model itself because that card is kind of bright. But just to show you what happens, if we do the same with the whites, it'll light up all that stuff that's really bright. So you can use that too to see where you're clipping. Now the background, the little placard I've got here, the blueprint of the rifleman, is a little bright to my eye and is distracting from the main model. Now if you change exposure, it's going to change everything. And this one's going to be tough because we have a blueprint with a blue leg painted specifically to look like it's stepping out of that blueprint, and we don't want to change the model. Now, ideally, what we want to do is bring out the text on the blueprint behind the battle mech. For reference, the blueprint is curved so that his right foot is actually sitting on top of the blueprint to help emphasize that he's walking out of that blueprint. But that also makes it difficult to separate the model from the background. I really just want this top section. The easiest way to do it, we're going to do it in 2 steps. First, we're going to choose a color range, and we're going to specifically choose darker color. Let the AI pick it out. Now, we don't want all this, so we're going to go to subtract, pick the brush, and we'll just clean up this mask a little bit. And I do want it to get that line right there. So we can go right about there. I also see that we've got a little piece up here. Oops. We've got a little piece up here that I want to clean up. Make sure that it's masked in. A little too much. There we go. All right, so now the changes we make are only going to happen in that red area. We'll turn off the overlay. It'll disappear anyway, but let's take a look at what happens when we play with our contrast. You can see it gets lighter, it gets darker. It's not bad. I don't know that it really does a whole lot for it. What if we go to preset? We have clarity here. Pick our clarity. It automatically pops that clarity in. Now we can dial that amount down a little bit. I'm pretty happy with this one. We're going to call this one done. Let's get it exported. Now we continue to our third and final model, Sigvald. This particular model was painted by Luca of Miniatures Den. If you have not already gone over to his Twitch channel, I encourage you to go. It's a lot of fun just hanging out with chat, but he also will teach you a lot about painting. Okay, here we have our white balanced and already cropped image of Sigvald. We've pulled it out of Lightroom over into Photoshop. We're pleased with the color balance. Now we want to do some cleanup on the image. And again, we're sticking to cleanup to make the model look like the model appears. My preferred method is to make a copy of the original layer. So now I've got this background copy. So we've zoomed in here and you start to see the detail. And what we're looking at are things in the picture that really shouldn't be here. And notice this little string here coming down. It looks like it goes all the way down this pillar here. We don't really want that there, and it's not really changing the model so much. And we could actually go in here if we wanted to with a pair of tweezers and pull that off. But I've already got my picture taken. I don't want to go through all that again. So I'm going to come over here to the left, and I'm going to pick my spot healing brush tool. It's a little band-aid with a dashed line around it. And I've got my cursor here, and I can use my bracket keys to make it larger or smaller. And what I'm going to do is pick out a few of these little things here and just left click and kind of color over it. Photoshop is going to fill that in with information. Now if I do it up here, I just got to be careful. I don't want to get too close to the pillar because it'll start to eat away. But that's pretty good. Here's a nice little piece. You probably won't even see that in. And keeping in mind, we're doing this for like Instagram or something. People probably aren't even going to see this whether I clean it up or not. But if you're doing it for box art and you really want it to show up nicely, those little details can be distracting. But I think we've got all of the major stuff here. This is what I mean by non-destructive editing. We've got the main layer, we've got the layer where we just did these brush healing tools. If I turn that off, you can see down at the base of the model, you can see that dirt disappearing. I forgot a piece over here. We're going to go in and clean that up. There we go. Now that looks so much better. We really haven't done anything to the image, but removing the little bits and pieces like that can make a huge difference. Comparing this image to the actual model, I'm pretty pleased with how this has come out. And I could walk away right now and feel like I've got a good picture. But what if I want it to be a little more saturated? The colors aren't as vibrant. Well, there's a couple ways to do that, and this is where we get into the non-destructive layers. We could click and add a vibrance layer. You have vibrance and saturation options here. If we turn this up, when we get to about 15, you see a significant difference in the vibrance. And if I turn that layer off and on, you'll mainly see it in this upper fold of the cloak here. That's a really good spot to see it. It's very subtle. It's also done a little bit on the base. It's added just a little pop to the non-metallic metal on the blade and on the shield. That's not a bad adjustment. What if we do saturation? See, as we start to turn the saturation up, now he's starting to look a little brighter. The golds are popping, but that's not really what I see when I look at the model. So we could maybe turn that down a little bit or even get rid of it altogether. But it's little adjustments like that. And you're the one who has the model in hand. You're going to have to take a look at that model and make these adjustments to your taste. So let's just turn the vibrance layer off. That's one way to do it. You've got a hue and saturation option where you can turn the saturation up a little bit. Should have the exact same effect as what we did with the saturation on the last one. That's actually not bad. This does look like what I see when I look at the miniature at about 14-15%. You can also change the lightness And you want to work very small adjustments here. And if you just want to return to 0, just double click that little arrow. All right, let's turn off the hue saturation layer. So here's a color balance. Why didn't we just use color balance to color balance this guy out? Well, because color balance in this tool is not about balancing the luminosity and getting the right white balance. This is about changing the amounts of color. So when you're working with Photoshop, you're basically working with 6 different colors. You're working with cyan, magenta, yellow, red, green, and blue. You'll usually hear this referenced as CMYK. C for cyan, M for magenta, Y for yellow. The K is black. This is the color mode that is used for printing pretty much anything. Magazines, book covers, whatever. They're using CMYK. The printer has more control over the actual tones than what you would get from RGB or whatever. RGB specifically made for screen anyway. We're trying to get to print, so we have to work differently. On the cyan red line, if I move to the left, you'll notice that he gets more of a cool tone. And I can go crazy and go all the way down. It gets very cool. If I go to the right, it gets warmer. That red is coming in. Same with magenta and green. If I go to the magenta, I take the greens out, replace them with magenta, and vice versa. And then yellow and blue, of course. If I want the purples on this model to really pop out, I can go to the left here and really pop it out. But notice what's happening is everything in the image is getting a little bit more magenta. This is where you want to use masks. That's a whole topic to itself. One of the most powerful tools that Photoshop has are the curves. The curves layer looks a lot like your histogram, and it works a lot like the histogram. It's the same sort of idea in that you've got your darks on the left and your brights on the right. And this is shown in this little gradient bar underneath here. So this lower quadrant would be your shadows. This upper quadrant would be your highlights. Here are your midtones. We have to think about this in 2 dimensions now. So left to right, you go from dark to white. But also from bottom to top, you are brightening the tones in that area. So what happens if you think the image is a little too dark? Well, what you want to do is change that white point. And we could do it with the white eyedropper, but you can also take this little arrow here and you can move this to the left. And what it's doing is it's changing that white point. See how it's this line here? This is where the white cuts off. And you can already see a change in the image. It's brightened up the image a little bit. Has not changed any colors. It's just brightened everything. If we were to do that on the dark side and move it in, it'll darken everything. Now we've got tons of contrast, way more than we need. We can pull this back and pull this back. But what if I just want a little bit more brightness here? We'd like to see more detail in this calf, for example. What we want to do, this line is showing you that relationship. Down here, black is black. Up here, white is white. This line is showing you that neutral incline. It's going from black to white in a perfect gradient. We want our blacks to be just a little brighter. We can choose anywhere on this line to put an anchor. Let's put one right here. Now I can move this anchor up, down, side to side, and it'll have different effects. If I move it to left, the image gets brighter. If I move it to the right, the image gets darker. Notice what's happening with that curve. When I go this way, it curves above the line, which when you look at the graph, or when you look at the gradient on the left-hand side, tells you the higher that curve, the brighter the pixels in the areas. If I go to the right, it gets darker because it's below the line. That line is basically telling you this is our neutral area. And you're changing brightness and darkness based on the relationship between the curve and the line. But let's look at the other way. Here I have my anchor. If I go up, it will brighten the image. And if I go down, it will darken the image. So what's the difference between left and right and up and down? Image one is more or less shifting your black point and white point a little bit. The other one is actually brightening. But let's say that we just want to add a little bit more pop to this model, but we don't want to change the colors, and we don't really want to change the overall brightness. Now, curves are sensitive. You don't have to do a whole lot, but let's put an anchor right here, and let's go ahead and put an anchor up over here. Why are we doing that? Because each anchor point is trying to keep that curve from moving too much. Now, that's a really dark area. If we go about the mid place, and I start to pull this up, notice what it's doing there. See how the curve is sort of snaking around? Every anchor point changes the direction in which it moves. So when I pull up, my darks are getting a little darker and my brights are getting a little brighter, but look what it's doing to the image. What we want to do is just lift that shadow area up a little. Now we can move this up just a hair. And just sort of play with it and look at it by eye. Just a minor curve here. Now let's look at the difference. Most of what we've done is happening on the background, but if you look at this, the shin here, when we turn the curve on, there's more separation between it. It didn't really do the shin, probably because our anchors are in the wrong place. Let's dump this curve. Non-destructive editing. It's for the win. All right, so let's try to get that to show up. If I lift here, now look just at the shin. I've got more detail there, but I've made the whole image bright. Let's drop an anchor in right here, and let's pull that back down towards where our normal color was. We're getting a little bit brighter here in the bottom, a little bit brighter here in the shadows, and then everything after this is a little less bright. It's just below our line. Because the background is more in the shadow zone, it gets brighter. And a lot of the shadows on the model itself are getting brighter. We are seeing more of the shin. Again, this is where you might want to do a little masking to protect certain areas. So there's a lot there you can do with the curves. It takes some practice to control it. It can be a little scary. Let me show you a tool I have. Okay, we've ditched all the layers we were playing with. I want to show you a tool. This was created by photographer Blake Rudis. It's called his Zone System. And I've had this for a little while. I don't mind playing in curves, but there's a lot of experimentation and then a lot of masking. And this is just one example of one of many tools that are out there that you can find that help make this a little easier. While I'm not saying to not go and purchase this plugin, I'm really just using this to show you what you can do with curves in a simpler way than going through step by step. So if I open up my Zone System panel here and I click this button, it will create a mask based on the luminosity of the image. It's created 5 new layers for me, going from 0 to 10 using the Zone System, where 0 is the darkest, 0 is black, and 10 is as white as you can get. And it has made a different layer for each one of these with a layer mask. It goes out and it finds where are the darkest spots and masks those off. Everything in black is protected. Everything in white, those darker areas, are selected. And so 9 and 10, here are your brightest parts of the model. And everything else is protected. To get that mask view, if you hover over a mask on a layer and you hold your Alt or Option key and then left click, it will activate the mask. And there you have all of our midtones. Now, considering we were trying to separate the model from the background, this makes me very happy. There's no background in the midtones. Now we'll Alt Option, left click again to get back. So what do we do with this? We know that zone 0 to 1 that's our darker areas. So we select that layer, and we can come up to this curve modifier, and let's just go crazy. We can do a -3. We're going to change the dark areas with just this -3 curve. Notice what it did. This is a pretty severe curve. But look how nicely and evenly it's done it, because what the tool has done is selected only the darkest zones. So we can change those dark zones as much as we want to and not worry about losing what's in the light zones. So you could do this without the tool. The tool just makes it a lot easier. But here we've brought those darks down almost to the very bottom, all the way across this whole first quadrant of the histogram. And actually, that's pretty nice. If you do the before and after, notice it's not really impacting the model, except in a very few places. It's catching it in the very darkest areas of the model. Well, what if we don't want it to do that? We can modify this mask. Select the mask, hit B for brush, resize it. The parts that are masked are black, and so to remove a mask, we want it to be black. So we switch over to black on our color. We can come over here and we could just very faintly do this and sort of wipe out the dark tones so that we're not changing the model at all. And now when we do this, you can see if you look on the calf, on his right calf, right back in here, when I remove the zone, you can see I've missed a spot there. It's not changing quite right. We don't actually want anything on that calf to change. So let's come back in here and we clean this up a little bit. So now his lower leg is not changing color because we've masked that out. You can spend hours doing this. If you're doing box cover art, maybe it's worth it. But again, we're doing this to make the model appear like the model, not to appear like how we wish we had painted the model. That's just sort of a quick demonstration of what it does. Let's look at the 9 to 10 curve. See how it's isolated all of our brightest brights? And then the midtones are just the midtones. So all his tool is doing is going in there and specifically selecting those. Now you can do this manually. Let's start by selecting a color range. And we come in, and here at the top it says select sampled colors. You're telling it you want to pick specific colors. So if we've got the eyedropper tool, that's how you'll pick your color. And then if you want to add an additional color, you can do an add to sample. If you want to remove a color, you can subtract from sample. So you use these together to pick what you want to select. So let's say I want to pick purple. Now this looks really odd because my fuzziness is 200. Let's dial that back. I don't know why it's at 200. There. Now we've picked that, the purple, and it's mostly this cloak, and it's a little piece down here. We can adjust this fuzziness to whatever we want it to be. So let's pick the cloak. If we hit OK, it automatically creates a selection. You can see little marching ant lines, and it's only selecting areas that match the color we wanted to do. So now if we want to go to an adjustment layer and we want to do curves, the purple turns out it's a mid-tone. Something I would suggest doing is coming down, double-clicking on curves 1, and purple on cape. We'll just give it a name so we can remember what we're doing. Now, we can move this and watch what happens on the cape. Now we're playing specifically with that color on the cape. And clearly you don't want to do too much because it will not only change what the model looks like, it'll start to give you some artifacts, which are pixels that don't agree with the image overall. But we're not really here to change the color, are we? We're here to actually take a look at our tones. What are our, think in that zone system of 0 to 10. If we go back to select, hit color range again, instead of sampled colors, we can tell it we want you to pick up the shadows. Now all we need to do is change, we can play with the fuzziness. Remember, the black is what it's protecting. The white is what it's changing. Range is another thing to play with to try to dial it in. What we want, let's say we're just trying to get the background to be a little darker. If you play with these a little bit, you'll get it down pretty close. Let's just go with this for argument's sake. Okay, we've picked our shadows. Now we've got a lot of sigvold that we don't want, but all this area here is not protected. Let's just go ahead and we're going to make a curve. It will automatically apply the mask we just created. Clearly we don't want all of sigvold on there. So Alt Option, left click to see what's been selected. We've got a whole bunch of him. Let's go to our B for brush, and we can just color this in. And we're not going to do all of this because I've got things to do that don't involve Photoshop today. All right, now there's some stuff in the background that we'd like to get rid of here, so we change our brush to white. You can switch between your two colors that are selected over here with X as a hotkey. It'll just change those two for you. Also, we can come up to our little circle here. We can change our brush. It's at 100% hardness. We want it to be a little fuzzy, so let's get it down to 40%. Because what happens is it gets to where you start, this gives it a little feather so that you can remove parts and sort of fade it in to what you're leaving. So it's not quite as dramatic a change. We can get rid of all of this down here. We don't care about all that. Maybe leave a little bit there in the front just for effect. Okay, Alt Option, left click on our curves to get ourselves back. Now we've got ourselves masked ready for a curve. We want the background to be darker. So what do? We can start by taking our black point and moving it to the right just a little bit. Okay, we want to get it snugged up against our curve there. Now we can put an anchor onto our line and we can draw that down. And now let's take a quick look. And you can see here where some of my mask is not clean. It looks really bad there. So let's zoom in, grab my brush. I'm going to change, make sure my colors are right. And because I'm wanting to change this area, I'll hit X to change my brush to white because it was on black. Oops. So make sure you're selected on your mask. And now you can clean that up. And this is what that tool I was using earlier does for you. It's a lot easier to let it do that hard lifting. Don't forget these little areas in here. So you can see the benefit of having a tool like that, but you can also see that you can do this yourself. It just takes a little time and patience. And you can sit here for hours doing these things. Let's check what we've got. That actually isn't bad. So there we have it. Let's say you did all that work and now you're going, oh, it's too dark. You can take your curves layer, and within the layers panel, up here at the top, you will have opacity. You can take this opacity and dial it back. So you've done all the work in the curve. Now you're now you're fading it a little bit so that it looks a little more natural. We'll turn it back there. It is a little dark. Now since we're here, I like 80%. 80% looks about right. It's not really impacting the model. I do see one other thing that really bothers me, so we're going to clean this up on the base because some of our mask overlaps and it leaves a hard line. There we go. And what I've done is I've added this, or what I've done is removed the black from that base. The base is not, the rim of the base is not that important, and I want it to be darker. Okay, so we'll call this our final thing, even though I could literally sit here for hours doing things like this. Oops. I could literally sit here for hours doing things like this just to clean it up a little bit. We don't want to do that. We got better things to do. On each layer, you also have a setting here that will change it. And you can go through here and experiment with these and see what they do. They all do a little bit of a change. Like if you really want that background to be dark, this will do a lot for you. But what it's doing is it's just taking the changes on that adjustment layer and popping them to where they work a little different. It's changing the relationship between your adjustment layer and everything beneath it. So like this vivid light here is really just popping everything off to help separate that model. That's where you might want to use the opacity some more to bring it back. So if you really wanted that dark background, that's a great way to do it. So I think that pretty much covers it. So you bring your image in, you make a background copy so you can clean up the garbage on the base, and then you can do something with the tones to change those, make them look better using masks and layers and curves. So it's a bit of a mess. There's a lot of experimenting. There's a ton of stuff in Photoshop you can do, and a lot of it takes playing around. There are a bunch of videos that you can find online that will help explain how to use some of these tools, but I find the best way is to use the video to tell you how it works, and then go in and play with it and play with it and play with it, and you'll find your favorite tools and you'll start using it. If you find one method to do something in Photoshop, it's almost guaranteed there are 3 or 4 other ways to get to that same method, and it all depends on your artistic eye and what you want to do. But there I think we have it. I think we've got Sigvald done quite well. So until next time.